talktainmentradio.com, the world's greatest radio. The way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
All righty. Let me say good day to all of you wherever you are listening on the airways of talktainmentradio.com. I am Mr. Bobby, and again, welcome to Talktainment Radio. You are now listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and it is heard exclusively on talktainmentradio.com. To get in contact with the show, you may call this number, 1-877-932-9766, and you can get in contact with the show that way. We also encourage you to go to the talktainmentradio.com homepage and click on the programs, and then you'll scroll down to where the compensatory concept, that's in the Wednesday action with Mr. Neely Fuller on there, and you can click on that, and you can hear us live, and that also gives you a chance to be able to ask some questions, especially if you call in. We will also read your Gmails, and we are stacked up with those, and we appreciate you calling. Also, we will be discussing or information about donations. We will do some for this hour, and an announcement will be made in the second hour, and that money that you donate goes to the second hour of production, because it does cost to produce the compensatory concept. Mr. Fuller and myself are not compensated in any way, fashion, shape, or form from that, but it is done that way so that the callers or listeners can have an opportunity to participate in the show. Last week, we read an email by a gentleman named Mr. Palmer, and he spoke about intelligent resistance, and I'm kind of deliberately taking my time so we can set this up when I give the signal for that to be heard. I did call Mr. Fuller, about that, and Mr. Fuller agreed to allow that to be said so we can comment on that. So before we get started with that, let me say this. Good morning, Mr. Fuller, and how are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
All righty. Yeah, that's very good. Okay, anyway, a question came up about intelligent resistance, and Mr. Fuller did not, or could not rather, recall when it was said, but he gave his definition, and as he and I talked, and by the way, Mr. Fuller and I do not talk or discuss too much about how the show goes. It just flows whichever way that it goes. Mistakes and all, it's live, just the way it is. So that's open to criticism. Some do not like it that way, but that's raw. It's not rehearsed. Whatever is said is said. Anyway, I played it for Mr. Fuller, and he said, yeah, go ahead and do that, because if he has made a mistake or if it's not clear, he wants to clear that up. So if we have that ready to go ahead and play that. This is Neely Fuller and myself discussing this intelligent resistance.
And in the frame, if you look at that movie in Shawshank Redemption, he had to put up with a lot of things that he didn't want to put up with.
He got beat on.
He got beat on. He got sodomized, all right, by other prisoners, which is what happens in a system of white supremacy. You get shot at, or you might get killed by other prisoners.
So are you saying that we are to be beat on it also then?
No, but I'm saying if it happens.
Yeah.
You may have to endure some of these things in order to get in position where you don't have to endure it.
Oh, okay.
See what I mean?
Woo. Yes, sir.
See, you're a prisoner of war. So everything that goes with that means you have to endure it.
Okay.
See, every prisoner is thinking about, hey, I'm getting out of here. I mean, most prisoners anyway, except those who have become institutionalized. They've got to the place where they like it, like being prisoners. But most prisoners won't. They don't want to be prisoners.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, but you have to be intelligent about how you go about doing it.
Yes, sir.
I mean, your first day in a prison, I don't think you run right up to the razor wire and say, I dare you to shoot me. All right, when they've told you don't go anywhere near that razor wire, you will get shot.
Yeah.
That is not intelligent resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, therefore, if you're pulled over, don't fuss, don't fight, and don't flee.
That's a good word, intelligent resistance. I never heard that term before, but that sounds good.
Counter-racism is all about being methodical and intelligent and logical in every move that you make.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're not going to be what?
Successful. Okay, there you heard an excerpt from a program that Mr. Fuller and myself did, and he spoke about that. And as Mr. Fuller and I talked last week, he mentioned that it is not in the book, but when Mr. Palmer wrote that question, he was referring to this show. Mr. Fuller, good morning again. You referred to it, you used examples in that to make it clear. Is that correct?
Yes, I intended to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, is there anything else that you want to add to that so that...
no, if there's any other questions, then I'll try to answer those questions.
Okay. All right. So there you go, Mr. Palmer. These questions that you asked concerning that, Mr. Fuller did address that. Remember, it is not in the code book, and it's not in the definitions or the word guide. It's not in there. You won't find it in there. But Mr. Fuller offered it off the cuff. By the way, I have to do this. For those that are listening, go to Talktainment. I misspoke this, but go to talktainmentradio.com. Hit the Listen Live button, where you can also like and share. You can view the entire program. Mr. Fuller, there's a lot that's been going on in the news, elections and court cases and all that. But as we try to produce justice, and we hear all this stuff, constantly bombarded with that, how do we continually keep the focus on what we are supposed to be doing in resisting justice, or rather in resisting this racism, while we are yet still in this prison system?
More than anything, I try to say more than ever, but more than anything, because we're supposed to be doing it all the time. Divide everything into one of two categories, just one of two categories: constructive, non-constructive. That which works for the best and that which doesn't. And try to make everything that you do in every area of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and if someone is fighting you, war, someone opposing you, someone saying something harsh to you, to your detriment, deliberately and unjustly, that's war. Try to always, before you do or say anything, think about what the result is going to be, because there's only one of two categories: constructive or non-constructive. Either something is going to work for you or against you. And this will pertain to every person, really, every creature on the planet, but particularly when it comes to people of color. Constructive, non-constructive, cause and effect. Something non-constructive or destructive, or rather something constructive or non-constructive, which would be non-constructive would be destructive. But those are the two categories: constructive, non-constructive. That's all. Don't try to think about anything else, any move that you make, anything that you say to someone. Think about, is the result going to be constructive or non-constructive? Think about that before you even say anything to anybody, anywhere. Is it going to have a constructive result or not? That throws out a whole lot of loose profanity and all like that, unless you can prove that profanity is going to have a constructive effect. It's not going to make a bigger problem than you already have. Okay? Some people prefer to do it. The code book says that stay away from that. Don't use what you call curse words and whatnot. It really doesn't help in most cases. You can find better words to use in order to get something done in most cases, unless something's completely out of order. I mean, to the extent that you attempted to try to use those words, which means you have to look at what that order is, what is causing out of order, because usually that won't help. Being discourteous certainly won't help in any type of instance. A lot of people think that this is a part of the culture, and it should be. That's what they think, that using profanity, cursing people out, that is a standard part of black culture, or even doing it in a friendly way. Profanity all day long. Some people can't say anything without using profanity. I've been around people like that, and they think that that's the way that's a standard part of black culture. Borderline discourtesy, if not outright discourtesy, saying something derogatory. Just get rid of all of that and just talk in a way that you just get things done in the best possible manner. That's what communication is for. You get the best possible thing done in the best possible manner. Otherwise, it's best not to say anything, which with a lot of people, that's almost like suicide. That's like, some kind of harm is being done. You're ignoring our culture. Unless you're just running your mouth all the time and just rambling and saying all kinds of terrible things about something or somebody. We call the birds in the sky, the trees over there across the street, the bus going by. We think that we got to call it a MF or something like that. Everything is that. That's a description for everything. And if you don't say it, you're not acting black. That's a bunch of nonsense.
Yes.
It ought to stop.
It ought to. Yes. Let me ask you this, Mr. Fuller. With what you just said and illustrated, with the background of the movie The Shawshank Redemption as a background, with the suggestions that you just made, would that be considered a type of intelligent resistance in that you are resisting logically?
Yes. Everything that you do that is constructive. A lot of people don't comprehend that, I think. Or sometimes in what they say should or should not be done, they dismiss all of that. And that's why I'm saying anything of constructive value, anything that a black person does that has a constructive effect, works against the system of white supremacy. Because in the mind of a white supremacist, if you're black, if you're a person of color, black, brown, red, yellow, if you have color in your skin, you're supposed to always be talking stupid and doing stupid things and never doing anything of constructive value unless they want it done for them. Then that's when they make a black person very constructive, when they put the whip on his or her back. All right? Then that black person for the first time will do something that makes sense. But when the whip stops, the sense-making stops. That's what the white supremacists want.
All righty. TalkTeam@radio.com is a 24/7, no-charge, worldwide broadcasting facility with hosts delivering on various topics such as news, lifestyle, sports, law, health, wellness, religion, and politics. Now, here's one that I'm going to share with you, and it is called Wiggins World. This is where Stacey Wiggins comes in and gives you the latest information that he shares with people every week. Now, if you want to know what that information is, then you'll have to tune in It's called Wiggins World, and it is exclusive to TalkTainmentRadio.com. All you have to do is go to TalkTainmentRadio.com, click on programs for the scheduled times, and you'll find out. TalkTainmentRadio.com, that's radio the way it should be heard. I am Mr. Bobby. I am the co-host on the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller. And if you would like to call in to the show, 1-877-932-9766, or you can go to TalkTainmentRadio.com, hit the listen live button at the top, and then you can hear the program. And while you are there, hit the like and subscribe button. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of action going on there. Let's go to the Gmails here. This comes from a loyal listener in Michigan. It says, Mr. Fuller, in the discussion on the topic of why interracial relationships are being promoted so heavily, you explained that the core of the strength of white supremacy is to always cause confusion in the minds of non-white people. One explanation you gave was the white supremacists play tricks on the mind of black people to cause maximum sexual confusion at all times in every way possible. You also mentioned, Mr. Fuller, that part of the white supremacist confusion is the illusion of a black male and white female relationship. You stated, Mr. Fuller, that the white supremacists will allow this now, but over a period of time, the cost of doing business over the deception is going up. So we have to have a limited number of white females spread out all over the world with a mission. Their mission is to capture the minds, particularly of the intellectual non-white males, particularly black males, etc. My question is this, Mr. Fuller. Why do white females and or white males choose black males or females more so than the other non-white males?
Why do they choose black males and females?
Yeah, why do white females and or white males choose black males or females more so than any other non-white males?
More so than any other non-white male?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you mean like the people who are classified as yellow people or brown people?
Now, for that one, you would have to ask her. I'm just reading it as she wrote it.
Well, that's what it sounds like.
Okay.
No, they choose them all. Anything that works. So you see, I'm beginning to see more and more white males walking alongside what is called, quote unquote, Asian females, which I hadn't seen a lot of that before. I'm seeing more and more of it now. But according to counter-racist logic, it figures. Why? Because a lot of people who are classified as the yellow people, all right, or Asian people, are beginning to gain more and more power throughout the world. So the white supremacists, the really refined ones, they always move where any non-white people look like they are gaining power, and they do that sexually, all right? One of their first moves is to move their females or their males into these sexual positions. And so when you capture a person's mind sexually, you just about got them in everything else. That's why they are doing all this scramble sex and borderless sex that has no borders with non-white people. That's to weaken them. See, the more intelligence that non-white people show in their speech and action, the white supremacists start, like I said, they start making adjustments. They say, they're getting a little bit smarter than they have been for the last 1,000 years or so. Okay, so we got to head that off because they're not supposed to be getting just a little bit smarter unless we want them to be smart in certain things for a limited number of time before they go back to what they call their culture, which we will see to it that everything in their culture that will not help them to do anything that makes sense, all right? Because the white supremacists are totally mathematical. They only will do those things that will give them added strength. They don't do anything that will make them weaker. They make their opponents weaker, or their prisoners of war weaker, and the prisoners of war in the system of white supremacy naturally are all of the non-white people on the planet. So sexually, yes, they make sexual moves. Anything that they do sexually with non-white people is not, regardless of how it looks on the surface, anything that they do sexually is to give greater strength to the system of white supremacy. Nail that into your brain, into your, I don't care how it looks on the surface. And, you might say, well, it's just, hey, freedom, and it's people allowed to love each other. There's not enough love in the world. That's not what that's about. That has nothing to do with love. These are strategic moves that have to do with white supremacist power being retained and refined and maintained.
Okay.
Expanded.
Okay. 1-877-932-9766 is the number that you can call to get in contact with the show and ask your questions or your comments, which are welcomed. This question here says, Mr. Fuller, I know under compensatory logic you're not supposed to call people liars. That is name calling. But, Mr. Fuller, how do you make up words and terms daily that weakens the social, political, and religious system of racism through thought, speech, and action?
You ask people, you go into the question mode. All problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. No exceptions to that. So just put it in the form of a question rather than call a person a liar. That's name calling, all right? And that calls for more argument. People will resist that type of label. So what you do is simply ask, is that the truth? And is there any way that we can find out and prove that it's the truth? See, these are two questions. Is that the truth, sir? Are you telling the truth? Now, a person might say, well, it sounds like you're calling me a liar. I say, no, I didn't call you anything. I asked you a question, sir. I asked you, is that particular statement you just made the truth? And then you say what the statement is. If they made a statement that sounds like it's not true. So you just ask a question. And then you say, is there any way for me to find out that definitely is the truth? Do you have any way for me to find out? Since you're telling me that this is the truth, is there any way for me to know for certain that what you're telling me is the truth?
They may not like you asking that question.
Yes, well then you can just ask another question. Well, by me asking you this question, sir, is this going to cause you to want to do me harm?
Okay.
And don't help them with the answer. Once you ask the question, put the question mark behind the question and wait.
Okay.
That's the codified procedure.
All right.
All day long, every day, everywhere. Don't get into a thing of, stay away from making statements. Statements have a tendency to lead to more argument. What you want to do is shut down argument.
Oh, right.
So questions, if you try it, you will find out that asking a question, that helps to keep down or resist the tendency to expand an argument.
All right.
Stay in the question lane.
Stay in the question lane. Okay, he goes on to say this. He says, if logic is cause and effect, Mr. Fuller, are there only two forms of logic, non-constructive logic and or constructive logic? And if so, why do I have to choose constructive logic regardless of how I feel?
Because that works. See, logic is just you do what works, but there are, it's correct, the statement that you made, the two forms of logic logic that leads to something non-constructive, which is what the white supremacists do when it comes to non-white people, and logic that leads to something constructive. Logic just means cause and effect, a way of getting something done. I mean, the procedure that works. It works for something that is correct, or it works for something that is incorrect. So you want to always work for that which is correct. So that's the choice that you make.
Mm-hmm.
And always, it requires some thinking. You step back, and before you say anything or do anything, try to say, now what's going to be the result? You ask yourself that question. What's going to be the result of this thing that I'm fixing to say? What effect is it going to have?
You're using logic.
Yes, you're using logic. And you can use it for better or for worse. The white supremacists, when they use logic, they use things that were for the better to make them stronger. And when they use things that are for worse, it's against their subjects, their prisoners of war, the non-white people of the planet that we call Earth. Because that's what they think about before they do make a move or make a statement about anything. What effect is this going to have on the non-white people of the world? Is it going to help them to become a better people, a stronger people? Help them to not be my prisoners? Well, then I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to say it. Because I want them to become weaker as compared to my strength over them, so that I can continue to abuse them.
Yes.
That's what I do.
Okay.
As a white supremacist. Otherwise, there's no point in being a white supremacist.
Okay. In the movie The Godfather, which you referenced quite a bit, was the use of drugs used to strengthen white supremacy?
Yes, absolutely. And they said it certainly wasn't going to strengthen the person who was around that table when the characters named Barzini and Tatalias and the Corleones were all sitting there. I saw the movie again last night on television. It was shown. That's a movie that is a classic, and they keep showing it over and over again. And that lesson goes out in that movie. When the Tatalias, the Barzinis, and these were the names of just the characters. I mean, you don't have to pay too much attention to the names. It's just what they were doing, because they were members of a criminal family. This is not to disparage any group or anything like that, other than showing you how the system of white supremacy works. That's the context you try to look at it in.
Okay. All right.
All right. Mm-hmm. And so what did the gentleman say at the table? He said, I don't believe in drugs. He said, I paid my people extra to try to stay away from that type of thing, because I know that, you have it near schools, that's an infirmary. In other words, that makes the people, destabilizes your entire society.
Yes.
Keep it away from schools. You don't want young children out there all drugged up and whatnot, in their infant years and whatnot. No, we don't want our children doing that. But in my district, and he was making a suggestion for everybody else around the table.
I don't mean to cut you off, Mr. Fuller, but I got to leave it there for. And before I return to the Gmails, we have a phone call. Go ahead, caller. You're on line one. Go ahead.
Great. My name is Thad. A pleasure to speak to you, Mr. Bobby, and Mr. Fuller. I also saw The Godfather last night as well. So I wanted to share with Mr. Fuller, and I'm sure he's aware of it, but with the audience, that there's also a scene where, before Sonny is killed, that's Vito Corleone's older son. There's a scene where they're all at the dinner table, and he mentions the N-word. He mentions the I don't want to repeat it on the air, but he mentions the N-words. He says those N-words, they're up there driving Cadillacs and such. Do you remember that scene, sir?
Yes, I mean most people would miss it, because it wasn't very clear, and it was a long camera angle, and the voice of Sonny, when he said that, wasn't too clear to most people. They may have missed it, but he did use the N-word. He said, and those N's, just like you say, up there in Harlem, while we've got this war going on among us, all right, among the families, the crime families, we got this war going on among ourselves. Those N's, they're taking advantage of it, okay? Yeah. And so they're riding around. We're not collecting the money because we can't show our faces on the street because we're out to kill each other, okay? Yeah. So they know about that division type thing, and that's what he was saying. We got to settle these disputes with the battalions. That's what he was saying, and with Barzini and whomever we're having a dispute with, so we can get back to collecting the money off of these colored people, off of these black people who are up in Harlem, who are just, they're making a heyday out of what is our money that we're supposed to be collecting from them as a part of the crime syndicates, okay? But we can't show our faces, so they're just running wild with our money. But we can put a stop to that if we settle this dispute among ourselves. And that has happened all down through history on a broad scale in the system of white supremacy. That's the illustration that you can learn from that. See what I mean? When the white supremacists go at each other, all down through history, during that interim, that's been a little small window in which the non-white people have gained a little bit of traction. But the white supremacists, right after they have that big dispute, like that so-called Civil War and all like that, they will do what? They shake hands and come out fighting the non-white people again. See, they always get back together. Yeah. And that's got to stop, because they keep doing that over and over again. They have, that throws black people off real easy. They'll say, oh, well, I mean, I imagine the slaves looking out the window of the big house back during plantation slavery. Slavery still, white supremacy is slavery, but that's another description. But back when we had plantation slavery in the northwestern hemisphere, a black slave looking out of the window and looking in the distance and seeing the smoke and the fires of battle and saying, well, now, hey, all of the white folks are fighting each other. I mean, they're just slaughtering each other by the bushel. And I'm not even in this. I don't have nothing to do with it, but they're fighting each other. And since Master, it looked like he and his sons, they got killed yesterday, and all that food I laid out on the table, they're not here to eat it. I prepared that meal for them and all like that. Because, I was always scared not to have it ready on time. I get whooped, but they got killed today. We just got a message that they died over there in the battlefront, killing each other, fighting about whether they going to keep me as a slave or not, and who's going to get the different parts. How they going to divide it up, just like the Corleones. How you going to divide up turf? That's what it was all about, that so-called Civil War. How you going to handle the Negroes? What's the best way to handle them? I mean, because the way you're handling them is bad for business. Say, we're going to always suppress them or keep them under wraps, but the way we're going about doing it is not going to work in the long run. I mean, we got to have some type of coalition here, some type of understanding so that the profits are distributed equally among the white supremacists. That's what that was all about. But getting back to the point, the slave looking out the window, and that food is sitting on the table getting cold because the white supremacists are slaughtering each other. The slave went and ate the food. That's what I mean by sometimes during these conflicts when the white supremacists are arguing back and forth with each other and fighting each other, the slave gets a little better benefits. Not for long, but just while the battle is going on.
Yeah, could I just wanted to say one last thing about that scene in The Godfather. What I thought was interesting about it was that it was being said at the dinner table with everybody present, including the women and children. So this is like a contrast to the one where where Vito is having the meeting with Barzini and Tattaglia and all the other heads of the 5 families. This one was just one Italian family with women and children present, where Sonny makes the statement. So it just helps you to understand how white supremacists probably talk when they're sitting around the family at the dinner table. I just thought that was very interesting to note. I have been paying attention to films ever since you started. You talked about the importance of learning lessons from film. There's just one last thing I want to say really quickly. I want to ask you, have you seen the movie World War Z?
World War Z?
Yes, it's with Brad Pitt and it's about zombies.
No, I've seen it advertised. I've never seen the movie.
Okay, if you get a chance, you should put that on your list. I know you have a long list of films to watch, but that one is very important, and I'd like to also recommend that the listening audience take a look at World War Z, because I think there's some big messages in that we can learn from in order to defeat white supremacy. There's a scene where a young scientist is brought on the team to help figure out what is this virus that's affecting people and turning them into zombies, right? It was a very interesting movie. And this young scientist says, he makes this statement to Brad Pitt about how you can defeat or find out the weakness of this virus. So the virus is, I substitute the virus with white supremacy, because he says this. He says that the virus basically can't resist the urge. It's like a serial killer, and it cannot resist the urge to want to get caught. So substitute the virus for white supremacy. It wants to take credit for its murders and basically how it's terrorizing people and dominating people and killing people. It wants to take credit for it like a serial killer.
Okay.
However, it leaves behind clues.
All right.
And the thing that you thought was the most brutal aspect of this virus / white supremacy turns out to be the chink in its armor.
Okay, my brother, I'm gonna have to.
And she loves to disguise her weakness as strength.
I don't even have to cut you off, but we're going a little bit over.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for your call, Mr. Fuller. You care to respond to that before we talk about your book?
Well, anytime black people during this system of white supremacy exists, everything that you study it to try to find out the racist content. Everything that you study, everything that you see people doing, because it's in there somewhere, either directly or indirectly. Even when racism is not being mentioned or anything about black or white or anything like that, there are lessons there. There are lessons about things to do and things not to do. And there are lessons as to why to do these things and why not to do these things. Because the white supremacists send out messages that give the system of white supremacy strength.
Yes.
To people who are viewing their movies and reading their books. All right? But the black people will look at the same movies and read the same books, but they won't pick up the messages.
They won't pick a message.
And that's what we have to start doing.
Okay.
What are the messages? Is it constructive or non-constructive? If you do this, and this, will it have a constructive result? Will it work for you or will it work against you? That's what you look for in every movie that you look at, no matter what the movie is.
Okay. Speaking about movies, let's move along to this. This is the 45-minute portion of the program, which we talk about, have you speak to your book. Now, is there any new movement concerning your books? What is the latest detail, and then how can we get the books or any relevant information about the books?
Oh, just go to producejustice.com. I was informed as of yesterday, everything is off and back in place again. We did have some distribution problems for about a week and a half, but now all of that has been corrected. So go to producejustice.com, and the books are up there. Canada, and also everywhere else in the northwestern hemisphere called the United States. Not yet in Africa or any place like that, but in the United Kingdom and in Canada, and here in what they call, quote unquote, the continental United States. The book is available. Go to producejustice.com, and what will come up on the screen is the method for ordering.
Okay. Now, Mr. Fuller, this is a side note. You just mentioned that the book is not available in Africa, but I'm here to tell you that something is going on with that. I don't know if you are aware of it, but there are a lot of people in Africa that are receiving your book or have knowledge of it. I don't know what the network is or how that is happening, but I've been getting a lot of Gmails from people from Africa. So something is going on that. Now, you are, as far as you know, are you trying to extend the coverage to what is called so-called Africa?
I'm trying to get the book all over the world, because that's the only way you can solve this problem. It's a world problem. The system of racism is a world problem. So I'd like to have my book in every village, in every town, among all the tribal peoples, everywhere. Make it available. But now, if the book is available in Africa, I'm not aware of it, and I don't know who's doing it. And it could be the white supremacists themselves.
Yes.
I'm certainly not being compensated from that area if anybody is illegally distributing and printing the book. And so, but I would have someone look into that.
Okay.
Because I'm not familiar with any of that. Nobody's contacted me and made that type of arrangement.
Okay.
But books are available electronically, and that's illegal if people are getting money for it.
Yes, if they're getting money for it. And by the way, before we move on, you have stated this, or something to the similar to this statement, that you are not going to, as far as you know, you are not going to go to an audio format. Is that correct?
No, I don't intend to do that.
Okay, good.
And I want people to learn how to read, including the people who missed out on doing that at some time or another, because they're going to have to do that anyway. So that's a part of the code. Try to learn how to read, and learn how to read all types of languages after you learn one language. I haven't done it, but I would like to be able to speak two languages that I don't speak now. I'd like to be able to speak fluent Spanish, and I'd like to be able to speak fluent French, and then maybe as another one, Arabic later on.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have the time to do that, to study it. But I would like to be able to do that now.
Okay.
And I think that all of the people of the planet should be able to speak those major languages. You're not going to be able to speak all the tribal languages, like the so-called American Indian tribal languages.
Right.
There's too many of them. Or even all of the Zulu languages and whatnot, whatever that is. But those major, what you might call European languages, or what they call Indo-European.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. This comes from Brother Thomas. He says this, question for Mr. Fuller. If whites practice white supremacy and also Christianity, doesn't that mean that Christianity and white supremacy are the same thing, since blacks have been practicing Christianity for hundreds of years and it has not eliminated white supremacy? They still are collective energy by faking or causing all of these racial incidents, and it only furthers their agenda to keep us wasting energy on emotional reactions and not using any logic whatsoever. I cannot believe that after hundreds of years that God's people still cannot see through this obvious and simple trick. They know how to misdirect our energy and then use it for themselves to stay in power.
Well, the person who is presenting that has practically said what is going on.
Exactly.
The white supremacists use They will examine any type of religious activity, what is called religious activity, among the non-white people of the world. And what they'll do, they will go and study whatever that religion is, and they will arrange that religion in such a way, by talking to the people, they will get the people to take out of their religion anything that's bad for the business, you might say, using organized crime terms, bad for the business of white supremacy. You take that out, and you put in something that's going to be supportive of white supremacy. That's the way they'll work it with religion, and that's how they do it. They just simply, they don't try to eradicate the religion or anything like that. They just make sure that nothing in that religion is going to tamper with the religion of white supremacy. The religion of white supremacy is supposed to be always the strongest religion on the planet, among the people of the planet Earth. So the white supremacists will go around, and there are a lot of what you might call tribal religions. They'll study that tribal religion, and then they'll go and talk to the chief and say, I'll tell you what, chief, you got a pretty good religion here, and we like your ceremonies. I mean, we don't mind you dancing around a fire. We don't mind you going to the rock over there and praying at that particular rock, I mean, for rain or whatever it is, and we don't mind you having the fire dance or whatever, any type of what you call the entertainment portions of your religion. You can do all the singing and dancing you want to. All right, you can do all the hand clapping and foot stomping you want to. But now, if you do anything in your religion that looks like it's going to be harmful to any part of my business, that part of your religion has to come out of your religion. Just ignore it. I mean, just don't mention it. All right. Don't get the people interested in it.
Yes.
All right. But you can do all the other stuff. You can have your religious food and all like that. We don't mind that. That's fun and games. But don't you do anything in your religion. I don't care what it is. Christianity, Islam, Confucianism, Hinduism, Judaism. If you're a person of color and you're going to do anything in that religion that's going to be harmful to the system of white supremacy, that part has got to come out of your religion, or you're going to find out that I'm your God. Because I will come down on you heavy, and you know it. And all of you religious scholars and whatnot, among you black people who have tried to use your religion against me, have felt my wrath. I'll try to talk to you at first. But if you keep doing what you're doing, and it's hurting my business, I will kill you. Because I'm your God. You don't have any God other than me. And if you don't believe it, try me.
Wow. Let's see here. Going to the Gmails. This one says, greetings, Mr. Fuller. Once again, we have an avoidable incident with suspected racist white supremacists. If the person of color would have applied the suggestion of not fussing, fight, or fleeing, although there is no doubt the suspected racist white supremacists initiated the incident, but because someone placed the bait in the water does not mean we have to bite. Now another child has lost their father. I think they were referring to the incident in Florida where a man got into a discussion with a suspected race soldier. I'm trying to use the code carefully here, and resisted. He fought and flee, and they shot him. Mr. Fuller, what say you?
Well, it's going to continue. See, we got to remember we are already prisoners of war. The average black person doesn't walk around thinking that he or she is a prisoner of war. They're not in these office buildings thinking that they are prisoners of war, but they are. I'm saying they are. I'm either saying something that's true or false. There's never been even a truce that's been declared officially and made official by a manifestation of deeds. In other words, what people actually do. I mean, all of the conflict white and non-white people, including slavery, which we still have slavery. Slavery was never abolished. It was abolished on paper. But what is slavery? Slavery is nothing but a form of mistreatment. That's all that it is. You're not chopping cotton, and that's what makes you a slave. That's just chopping cotton. All right? But you can be taken off of that plantation and still be a slave. You're no longer chopping cotton, and you might be somewhere working in an air-conditioned office.
But you're still a slave.
But you're still a slave to the system of white supremacy. Okay. Anytime anybody does anything against you because of your color, and there's nothing that you can figure out of what to do about it, you are by definition a slave. If a person mistreats you at the water cooler, you're a slave. If there's nothing that you can do about it. If you can't get a promotion, if you can't get a job, you're a slave. Why? Because it goes back to the original captivity. You came under them. Just because even in what you call plantation slavery, there were black people working in the big house, all right? They ate better food than a lot of white people at that time. Why? They were right there in the kitchen where the food was. They were preparing the food. So they were eating those chicken legs and turkey legs and whatnot, and along with the piles of potatoes and whatnot, and getting a lot of it, okay, before it ever made the master's table. And a lot of white people at that same time, even though they were white, they were out there who didn't have money and didn't have a plantation, and they were starving, all right? But the slave was still a slave. You're just a well-fed slave, that's all, because you are still being mistreated because of what? Your color. It's not how much money you got in the bank. I mean, they give it to you and they take it away, like they always do. Like in 2018, lots of black people got piles of money all over the planet now. And the white supremacists are giving them more and more of it. And they're strutting around like they're in control of something. They're not in control of anything. The white supremacists control them and everything that they have. And they pull the rug out from under them anytime they get ready. We see that. You can go down a list of names. Mm-hmm. But they pull the rug out from under. And that person that had everything yesterday has nothing today.
Nothing today.
Because they're still under the system of white supremacy.
Okay, with that...
Anytime they want to, they prove it to you.
Okay, with that, we leave it there for the first hour. And radio.com. We heard. We'll see you the second hour. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You've got the power. The world's greatest radio. TalkTainmentRadio.com. Talktainment Radio, worldwide sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest, and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
Live call-in talk show. Dial 1-877-932-9766 and join the conversation here on TalkTainmentRadio.com.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Hey, hello there, and welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go on the world's greatest radio, TalkTainmentRadio.com. You are now in touch with The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. If you would like to get in contact with the show, you can do it by this. First of all, go to TalkTainment.com, hit the Listen Live button, and you're right there. You can like us and share us on there. You can also do this. Call 1-877-932-9766, and you will be heard. And you can also just go to the YouTube channel, type in the word Talktainment, hit where it says radio, then scroll down to Talktainment number 2, and you can watch and hear the program live. Today we've been discussing, and that's going to be the flavor throughout the entire hour as we open up the West Coast action, the intelligent resistance. A caller had called or wrote in about that. Mr. Fuller's been addressing that. And if you listen or have access to the first hour, you might want to go back and check that out. So we're speaking of intelligent resistance, and here's a couple of questions here, since we're on that. So, can you ask Mr. Fuller, what does intelligent resistance mean under the compensatory code, and how do you combine codification with intelligent resistance intentionally?
Just another way of saying constructive, non-constructive. And if you're doing anything non-constructive, that shows intelligence. I mean, anything constructive.
Yes.
That shows intelligence. Avoid doing anything that is non-constructive as best you can. However, you are required in the system of white supremacy, if you are a person of color, to do many, many, many non-constructive things, and they will help you to do it as long as those non-constructive things are making you weaker.
Yes.
Or making you sillier, or making you a person of stupidity. All right? That's what they'll do. But when it comes to them, if you're doing anything with them or for them, it's got to be constructed for the system of white supremacy, which black people do that very efficiently. But the minute we do anything that's efficient, that's constructed for non-white people, the white supremacists immediately go to work to eradicate that. To shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they're not going to let it happen.
Okay.
But,
go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, but I mean, any song that you sing, anything like that, the white supremacists will look at your song and say, is this going to have an effect on non-white people that's going to inspire them to do something that makes sense? And they ask themselves that question. Mm-hmm. They'll look at your song, okay? And if it looks like it's going to inspire you to be a person that's constructive in all of your speech and action, that song is not going to be very popular.
Yeah, they might shut it down.
To it, right. But if you're going to have a song, you're going to write a song that's just full of all kinds of non-constructive garbage that you're going to dump into young non-white people's heads all over the world, they will finance you to the nth degree.
Yes, I know exactly what you're speaking about. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 1, okay. 2, 3, okay. Line number 3, you are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning. This is James calling from North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Fuller, for the benefit of victims of white supremacy around the planet, will you please explain the importance of following the compensatory counter-racist code exactly as you explained it in your code books?
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Well, the importance is you look at the white supremacists and you ask a question. What makes them so successful at what they do? that makes them stronger and dictatorial, the bosses over the non-white people. Anything that they tried a lot of things that didn't work. So they immediately got rid of those things that did not work. That's all it is. It's very simple. And they latched on to the things that did work. If they would try 10 things and 7 of them didn't work, they eliminate those 7. They're not going to continue to do those 7. They say, why? Because it didn't work. That's why. It didn't give me more power over these black people. I tried it, and it didn't work. It turned out to be a mess, okay? And it made them stronger. So I'm not doing those 7 things, but we have 3 more things left of the 10. So I tried those 3, and all 3 of those worked. And so I'm going to stick to doing those 3 things. Why? Because they always work against those black people and get those black people. When they try to pick it up, it works against them and works for me. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to push it in schools. I'm going to push it everywhere in my entertainment. I'm going to have it incorporated in everything that I do that's entertaining and all like that. Why? Because it works for me as a white supremacist and works against my prisoners of war, which are the people of color of this planet. And that's all a code is. Something that works for you and never, ever against you.
Okay.
So you latch on to it. Non-white people do not have a counter-racist code. That's the missing link. We don't have a way of going about doing things, and we don't, where you keep doing the same thing over and over again that always works, and never do anything that doesn't work.
Wow.
But what we do, we just grab stuff without looking to see whether it works or not. If it's just something that looks like people are doing, we just grab hold to it, all right, and hope that it will work out for us. That's why we get hooked on drugs and all kinds of nonsense. Black people gravitate toward nonsense. We got to a place where we worship anything that looks like it's nonsense. If it doesn't make sense, we want truckloads of it right now.
Right now.
Just dump it on us. All right?
Okay.
We've been trained that way.
All righty. We're speaking of intelligent resistance. And if you'd like to join in on the conversation, you can by calling 1-877-932-9766. You can also go to the talktainradio.com homepage, hit the Listen Live button, and man, you're on. And while you're there, you can like and share. Let's see this. This person asked, Mr. Fuller, what does counter-racist science mean? How do victims use their time and energy constructively to achieve maximum intelligent resistance? And finally, what is intelligent fear? So the first question is, what does counter-racist science mean?
It all means the same thing. All of the above, everything that was just mentioned, means what? Do what works that has a constructive result. You do this every day before you make a move on your own. Now you have to do a lot of things that the white supremacists require you to do that's working really against you. But that's the fate of being a prisoner of war, which is why we have to get rid of the entire system.
Right.
That's built in. But you do the best you can while you are in this prison to make yourself stronger and more resistant to the system that you are in. You actually have to eventually get rid of the system. But you do that through that process of doing all those things that are most constructive for yourself and for other victims of racism, other prisoners of war, everything that you possibly can, and everything that you can think of that you can do, that you're allowed to do, that is of constructive value, do that. Because everything that, even when it doesn't seem like it's working against racism, if it has a constructive value to it, I mean the food that you eat, if it has a constructive effect on your body so that you don't become obese and overweight like a lot of us are, huge numbers of us are obese. So obese that we have to get in wheelchairs now just to go down the block. I mean, you're 27 years old, and you haven't been shot or anything, or nobody has broken your arm or your legs or anything, but you're in a wheelchair on account of the type of body intake, the so-called fast foods and whatnot. You just blew up like a blimp without knowing that this was happening until it had happened. All right? So now you have to be in a wheelchair. And so if the house is on fire and you're on the second floor, your chances of going anywhere are zero. The white supremacists know that. All right? Even if they try to get you out, they will show up and say, hey, we showed up, buddy. But there wasn't nothing we could do. We just listened to you screaming there on the second floor because you were in that wheelchair, and there was no way for us to get you out. We don't have anybody on the team that's strong enough to put you on a cart and haul you down some steps in a burning house. It just ain't going to happen. All right? See, so they're doing that very subtly in the northwestern hemisphere, getting black people in terrible physical shape so that when there's a forest fire, any type of so-called natural disaster, a sudden flood, they can't get you out of that car. See, they study everything.
Yes, sir.
They know what they're doing to people. All right? And they say, hey, we showed up. I mean, we showed up. We had 4 engines there. And we had 6 ambulances. We got there on time. We went late. All right? But we had to stand there and watch you drown because there was no way to pull you out of that car. We didn't have equipment that would do that. So we had to stand there and watch you drown. Sorry about that, buddy. I mean, you know, we're going to the next, and try to help the next person. Okay? But everything that they do, so you have to study everything going on around you. There's a reason why there's no grass growing wherever black people are after a while. Okay? There's a reason why everything gets ragged. There's a reason why when Lil Jr. runs down the stairs in this high-rise building of new housing that they just gave you, now he wants to find some place to play, but there's no place to play outside. So he plays on the elevators. And so all of his friends play, chasing each other and whatnot up and down the stairwells and whatnot. I mean, and they use elevators, even though they're told not to play on the elevators and whatnot. They do that. Why? Because the white supremacists designed everything so that they can't play outside. It's nothing but hard concrete and broken glass out there. And another thing, other black people who are out there killing each other. All right? So now he's confined to this space of just tearing up the building. And in about 5 years, everybody's got to move again. Why? Because the heating system doesn't work. The elevators don't work. All the pipes are leaking. See, the white supremacists knew they were going to do that before they even built the place. They say, yeah, we'll put them over there. I mean, but they're going to be miserable because that's what we do. We put them in circumstances where we know they're going to be miserable.
All righty. TalkToneRadio.com is a 24/7 no-charge worldwide broadcasting facility with hosts delivering on various topics such as news, lifestyle, sports, law, health, wellness, religion, and politics. So here's one that I would like to share with you, and it premieres every other Tuesday here on TalkToneRadio.com, and that is Talking Sports with Mr. Bobby. My co-host, Trent McMurray, is with me, and we discussed the latest and the hottest topics in sports. Yesterday, we spoke about the Urban Meyer situation at The Ohio State University, and we even had a special guest to speak on wholeness. Yes, a holistic living. We had Miss Libby on from This Is Libby. The program is interesting, and all you have to do is go to the TalkToneRadio.com homepage, click on programs for the scheduled times, and you'll have all the information you need. Talk Tone Radio, that's radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby. I am the co-host on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. We are focusing in on the term intelligent resistance. And Mr. Fuller, throughout the show, has been speaking to that. But before we go to the emails, let's take this phone call. Line number 3, you are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
Mr. Fuller, I wanted to go to the point that you just made about, the instance you just gave us about how the white supremacists have put us in they provide housing, but, I mean, it's not a correct condition. And my question is, going to your definition of justice, I just want to take the first part, which is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. But if the system of white supremacy, you say that it's a system that has produced the most material things, and it's very efficient at producing material things, how could we guarantee that no person is mistreated when the white supremacists produce all the material things that's necessary for, you might say, life or existence?
Okay.
Like housing and fresh water and food, access to food, and just all the things necessary for life and existence.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
We're all prisoners of war. Don't forget that. See, we don't look upon ourselves as being prisoners of war. And many of us say that, hey, I'm free, I'm intelligent, I know how to do things. But if you overlook the fact that you're born in prison, and your prison uniform is the color of your skin, that's your prison uniform. Anywhere you go on the planet, there's no escape. So you have to act accordingly. So that's why I tell people to study some of the movies, and particularly the movie Shawshank Redemption. What do you do when you're absolutely a prisoner of war? You do what a prisoner of war can do. See, that's the thing. Now, a lot of prisoners of war, they just give up, and they just spend their time plotting a gang war or something like that behind the prison walls against each other, which is what black people do all over the world. Okay? We come together to fight, mostly. I mean, I don't care how we start out, we wind up going at each other. Okay? Just like prisoners. You expect prisoners to do that. Except those few who begin, like in Shawshank Redemption, the main character in the movie, Andy Dufresne, that was the name of the character in the movie, he did what? He did a lot of studying and thinking. That's one thing you can do when you're a prisoner of war. You study, you think. When you're a slave, you do some studying, you do some thinking. Studying and thinking about what? About the prison that you're in and how it's run. That's what Andy Dufresne did in the movie Shawshank Redemption. He walked around. I mean, in the opening scenes of the movie, the character named Red said, Andy Dufresne walks around like a man in a bubble. I mean, like he's in his own world. And what did he mean by that? He's different from the rest of the prisoners. He's spending his time thinking about what? How he can get out of there and stay out of there and never come back. All right? Whereas the other prisoners, like Boggs, just figuring out how he can sodomize somebody, how he can mistreat a fellow prisoner, like black people do, en masse. All right? And that's mostly what we think about all day long, how we can hook up with other black people and start a fight, particularly the black males. And that's all over the world, tribal leaders and whatnot. That's what they're thinking about. That's what they're plotting for. How they can go and mistreat people in the other tribe. And the white supremacists said, oh, that's what you're going to do. I'm going to help you. All right? I'll arm one tribe against the other tribe. Okay? And then next year, the tribe that I arm you to fight against, I'm going to see to it that they have better weapons than you, and then they'll come after you in revenge. And I'll sit back and watch the show. just like all you black people who do that type of thing in Chicago or in South Africa or wherever in the world people of color are. In Indonesia, people of color, I will set you against yourselves, and that's how you will occupy your time, just tearing up everything around you, terrorizing everybody around you, and everybody around you will be non-white. They'll look just like you. People that went to school with you, played on the playground with you. Now you're killing each other. That's exactly what I had in mind. You started out getting along with each other when you were 7 years old, you know, just little innocent children, small children. I made you into bigger children and kept you that way. But as you got older and older and older in your childlike minds, then I set you against one another, even though you just are just a block away from each other and always have been. You wind up one killing the other. The fella who used to be your school playmate, you used to play all the time. You know, that was 16, 17, 18 years ago. Now you killed him today. Now you're standing in front of the white supremacists talking about, I'm sorry. And the white supremacists saying, well, you killed your playmate, your ancient playmate. You know, you all got into a dispute about something or another because you grew up without growing up. All right? You were bang, bang, banging with your little toy pistols when you were 7 years old. And then when you got to be 32 years old, you bang, bang, bang with real ones. Same people. Same neighborhood. All right? I trained you that way. I knew you were going to do that. That's why I had you with that gun in your hand when you were 7 years old, rather than a book.
What was your second question, sir?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't. He said something about the movie Shawshank Redemption, and about getting out of prison and staying out of prison. But I'm asking, what would be the equivalent of that in terms of the real world? Would it be not? Well, I see it as we are in a system of white supremacy, but we're dominated, and I wouldn't see it as a mistreatment because, I mean, in this area of the world, my condition is better than a black person in the area of the world called Africa.
So what are you saying? So, I mean, what are you asking?
I'm saying, wouldn't the end goal be not being dominated by a person? That's a whole. I think that's a whole different. I don't know.
I think I understand what you're saying. Some black people are in a better position in the prison than other black people, correct?
Yes, sir.
That is true. All right. Andy Dufresne, in the movie Shawshank Redemption, positioned himself. See, that was a part of his thinking. All right? He caught the attention of, first of all, of some of the very people who were imprisoning him, and a lot of people in that prison would say, Andy is a sellout. See? All right. But see, they weren't thinking as far as Andy was thinking. Andy said, I'm a prisoner just like the rest of them, but I'm going to have to position myself in this prison in a better position and keep positioning myself in a better position so I will be in position to get out of here.
So he got into the library.
So what Andy do? Andy went about doing something that the rest of the people in the prison couldn't even fathom or didn't understand. But just because they didn't understand it didn't say that it didn't work for Andy, and it worked for the rest of the prisoners. What was one of the first things that Andy did? He kept persisting. Persistence is very important. In doing what? First of all, in getting a library.
Right.
All right? The prison didn't have a library that was functioning in a way that most of the prisoners wanted to use the library. All right? They had one, but it was, it wasn't what Andy thought was a good standard. Brooks was running the library. The library was ragged, you might say. So Andy improved the library. It took him a long time to do it, but he had time. A double life sentence, just like all non-white people. You got a life sentence under white supremacy. See, so you got time. Time is the only thing you do have. You don't have nothing else but time. All right? So you use that time to get in a better position. Now, Andy went into his own library that he helped create, and he studied the formation of rocks. And also, having leeway in running the library, he was able to move about the prison easier and go in different places that other prisoners couldn't go.
So all this was his plan.
He found out where the pipes were.
Yes.
He found out how the prison was constructed. The prison itself was constructed out of inferior material. That's how he could take that little rock hammer and slowly begin to whittle away at the walls. The walls were made out of inferior material. Why? Because Andy found out by studying what? Rocks. And how rocks formed. And actually the walls of the prison are made out of, stone. Okay? But it was inferior. Put together. It wasn't put together solidly. And he also knew that there were pipes on the other side of the wall of his cell. By studying the prison. That's what non-white people should do. Study the system of white supremacy, what it is and how it works. And then once you study something and you know what it is and how it works, you know how to work that system that you are in to your benefit, so that the system, if you want it to not exist, you can work that system out of existence.
So that is an example of intelligent resistance.
That's exactly what that means.
Yeah, rather than going out there acting foolishly and all other kind of stuff, he used the system against them.
Rather than driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour in a 40-mile zone, knowing full well sooner or later you're going to get pulled over, and already you're going to do your ghetto act by telling people what your rights are, and you ain't got no business pulling me over, and all like that. And the code, that's why we need a code, and they had a code. Don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee. All right? Yeah. Don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee. And when he deviated from his code by fussing, he fussed with the warden one time.
And got locked in.
Yes, right. He called the warden by a name that the warden didn't want to be called. That was a mistake. But Andy learned from that one mistake. Seriously. He used the word obtuse.
Obtuse.
And he put it in the form of a question, but it was still like name calling. He said, how can you be so obtuse?
We gotta leave
and the warden say, what did you say? You're forgetting yourself, buddy.
Gotta leave it right.
You know where you are? Right. You are in my prison.
Okay, pardon me, Mr. Fuller, but we have to break here. And he mentioned that one word that Andy Dufresne used, which he called the warden obtuse. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller, before we take this call.
Yes, so the warden said that, well, you have made a mistake. You came in my office and you insulted me. And so, since you have forgotten where you are, like a lot of black people forget, like we do every week, every day, I guess, somewhere on the planet, we forget we're under the system of white supremacy, and that will cost you. It will cost you. You do not have any power at all right, against this awesome system of white supremacy. So don't pretend that you have what you do not have. You don't have anybody to back you up when you're out there on that highway and you get pulled over. There's nobody. You are alone. And so don't fuss, don't fight, and don't flee. I say this over and over again.
Yes, you do.
Particularly in the northwestern hemisphere. I'm more familiar with that than I am in other places and whatnot. It might work a little bit different in other places, but I don't think so. I think that this will work anywhere. to do what works.
Yes.
Fussing, fighting, and fleeing when you are pulled over, you might say, at what you call a traffic stop, which is where a lot of these contacts are made in traffic stops, or when you're in some type of moving vehicle, okay? And over and over and over and over and over and over again. We have witnessed that every time, or most times, or too many times, when a person of color fusses, fights, or flees, they do what? They lose. That's what.
They get killed.
That ought to teach us something. I mean, just run the tapes, run all the different films where it has happened, and see who was the loser. I mean, just go back and gather them all up, or where there are tapes available, and just run them.
Yes.
And see who the losers were in that type of setting, over and over and over again. Now, you say, well, I found one or two where it worked. Well, yes, there are exceptions to all rules.
Yes, sir.
Okay? But don't count on the exceptions. That's not intelligence. All right? That's not intelligent resistance. No. Don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee. Why? It will work better for you if you don't do those three things.
Yes, yes.
But if you do those three things, most likely, the statistics show, the truth shows, you are going to lose.
Yes, okay. With that, let's go to the phone line. What line am I on? 3? Okay. Line 3, you are now on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning. This is James from North Carolina calling again. Mr. Fuller, do you ever become concerned that upon your death, the racists may seize that as an opportunity to mislead their victims by distorting the message you have conveyed in your code books? If so, what type of code should be put in place to counter that possible attempt?
You just did it. You point out that that's exactly what they would do. And all you have to do is just say, Neely Fuller didn't say that. You're saying that he said that. Yes, buddy, but hey, I've studied that lunatic's work, and he's he said this, but what he really meant was, don't go for it. Say, well, that's what you say he meant. All right, I'm gonna go by what I think he meant. Okay, not only that, I'm gonna go by what works for me, regardless of what you say about what Neely Fuller said or wrote. Because they will find something that I've said, all right, and I'm saying this officially. The white supremacists are very thorough in what they do. They are very successful in what they do. They'll go back and they say everybody makes mistakes. So they'll find some clipping that I've made, probably something that I've said, just like I did on this program a few minutes ago.
Yes.
All right? They say, we found a mistake. We found 2 or 3 mistakes that Neely Fuller made. That, so we'll just keep playing those mistakes over and over again. All right? They say, he said it, you heard him say it. All right? They'll take it out of context. Even when later on I found a mistake and corrected it. But you'll never hear about that.
No, sir.
See, they do that. That's why I say, don't follow Neely Fuller. Follow the logic. Okay? That's it. Follow the logic, because logic is universal. It will be here. It was here before Neely Fuller got here. It will be here when Neely Fuller is long gone. So tap into the logic and say, well, yeah, you say you found the mistakes that Neely Fuller made, but Neely Fuller also said that he made mistakes. And I ain't making that mistake that Neely Fuller made, okay? And you're trying to play me into accepting his mistake. Well, you didn't accept nothing else that he said, but you willing for me. Yeah, right. See, I know what y'all doing, okay? So it ain't about Neely Fuller no way. It's about what works for me and what doesn't.
Absolutely. What was your final question, sir?
The reason why I asked Mr. Fuller that question is because, the racists know that their victims are very gullible. And they know how we think, speak, and act. And I'm just concerned that when Mr. Fuller eventually dies, that they'll try to encourage black folks to open up compensatory concept churches, and there'll be paid preachers. Things that, unless I'm mistaken, when I read his book, the things that he didn't stress that we should be doing. And I'm just concerned that something like that might happen.
That's why I said that the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, which is the concept I'm presenting, and which is the title of my book, that's the thing to lock on to. Now, what does that mean? It means you don't follow any people, starting with Neely Fuller himself. See, all I'm doing is trying to be a signpost to what? Our arrow pointed to what? Logic.
Logic.
What works and what doesn't. That's what you lock on to. And now the white supremacists, oh yeah, they'll have a white-sponsored organization saying we're taking up. Well, we believe that Neely Fuller was correct. Some white person will say that.
Yes, yes.
All right? And they'll set up an organization, I mean, with a nice little building and everything, where you'll come and have meetings. The code says, hey, that ain't supposed to happen. And if it happens, it's a sure indication of white supremacy at work. I'm going to tell you that right now. Because the code is directed not to any organizations. It's directed to individual persons to make the individual person strong. Because if you make the individual person strong, if you solve the problems of the individual person, then you solve the problem of all individual persons.
Right.
That's the United Independent concept.
Right there.
So don't follow Neely Fuller or nobody else. Follow logic that came with the universe. It'll take you right where you need to go.
This Gmail is right on time, Mr. Fuller. It says, Mr. Fuller, a few weeks ago, I heard you in a discussion with a caller mention the word mentor, how we can mentor someone, etc. And being that you're big on the use of and naming of words, I thought I would inform you that mentor is a term that we should cease our usage of, and the reason is because it is a word whose origin derives from a Greek mythological character named Mentor, who helped to raise Odysseus' son while he was away engaged in the Trojan War. Mentor became Odysseus' son's advisor, teacher, and lover. Yes, lover. So when we hear the term mentor today, we only think of it in terms of just advising, teaching, and or training someone younger than us. However, it is also very much so means relations between an older male and a younger male. So I hope those of us who've either been aware of this or who will become and coming up with a compensatory definition or word for one who advises and teaches a younger person. Your thoughts? Well, to me, Mr. Fuller, this is just me, but he didn't ask me, he asked you. But I think you already answered it in your previous response. But anyway.
Well, I'll tell you another reference. That's why I wrote a word guide that's an addition to the basic code book. Now, I don't have all words in there, but that word mentor is in there on page 229. I'm looking at it right now.
229. Wait a minute, let me turn to it right quick.
The word guide.
Yeah, word guide. Okay.
See, so I took the word, not the way it's like you just said, it's historically used. I gave it a compensatory definition. And it says here what I have written on page 229 of the Counter Racist Word Guide, how to use words. Use this term to apply to the following during the existence of white supremacy. Now, if there's no white supremacy, then you can use the word mentor to mean something else. But this is the suggestion that I have in the code book, the word mentor. Use this word to mean one or more of the following. A person who has not told a lie. All right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's number one.
Yeah.
A person who has not told a lie. Now, you're going to say a mentor is a person who has never told a lie? All right. Right off the top, what does that do? That eliminates just about everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, because I don't believe there's any person who has not told a lie.
Okay.
All right.
Number two.
That's the assumption. But number two, a person who has not made a mistake.
Whoa.
All right. Okay. How many people are in that category that you're going to use as a mentor? Why? For a very logical reason. You're going to use as a mentor a person who has made a mistake. You know what's going to happen? You're going to make that same mistake.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Because that's your mentor. Because your mentor made a mistake. All right? Number three, a person who has not mistreated any person or any creature, or who has not refused to help the person who was most in need of help.
Oh, man. Mm-hmm.
Man, it's getting harder and harder to be a mentor so far, according to this definition. You know, I mean, number three, all right, then go to number four, a person who has not practiced white supremacy in any one or more areas of activity, and who is not a victim of white supremacy in any one or more areas of activity. In other words, a mentor, if you're going to choose a mentor, that person cannot be a white supremacist, and the person cannot be a victim of white supremacy if that person is going to qualify for to be your mentor. Now, I don't know who that's going to be if you're a person of color.
Yes.
Who is not a victim of white supremacy, not under the system of white supremacy, and going to be your mentor. Yeah, that person can be your mentor if that person is not subject to white supremacy.
Okay.
I mean, that's logical. Okay?
Yeah.
Number five. Where was I? Number three?
Yeah, you already did number four. So we're on number five.
Number five. Okay, now this is the one I recommend be your mentor. A code for thought, speech, and action that applies to all areas of activity and existence, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, counter-war. A code for correct thought. Now, it doesn't say that Neely Fuller is thinking correctly.
Yeah, correct.
That just says any code.
Okay, and the last one, because I have to go to break, the last one was what now?
And the last one was number 6, your mentor, the creator of all things, creatures, people, etc. Meaning, whomever you consider to be your creator. Yeah, that's a logical mentor. Mm-hmm. That's the last one.
Okay. They tell me I'm going to have to go to break here. Okay, so let's do this. Let me read this. Okay, talktominradio.com. We go where you go. Download the talktominradio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby. I am the co-host on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. We are speaking of intelligent resistance. If you have listened or want to listen to the entire show, it will be available for you to do that. And understand, get an understanding, even a codified understanding of what intelligent resistance is. Call in 1-877-932-9766. But at this time, yeah, I'm getting ready to do that. Okay. At this time, we want Mr. Fuller to talk about his book. So, Mr. Fuller, go ahead, please.
You can get the book by going to producejustice.com. In the last 2 or 3 programs, I think, I told people that the book was not available because it was not available. We had a distribution problem. But I understand, as of yesterday, that that problem has been solved and that the book is now available continuously at producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And that's the basic textbook, revised, expanded, 2016 edition, and the additional volume, because actually couldn't crowd it all into one book, be too heavy to carry around. So there's an edition called The Word Guide, showing you how to use words, how not to use words, what questions to ask about words. And I just read from page 229, the word mentor is in that book, and what the compensatory definition is. Now, the word compensatory itself, meaning making up for the definition that is not there that you can use and know exactly what you're talking about. Someone else will give it another definition, because words don't mean anything unless they have definitions. But different people have different definitions for the same word. So this is a compensatory definition that's made up for people who are victims of white supremacy. And all of these definitions in the Word Guide are designed to help the victims of white supremacy, not the white supremacists. These words are designed and crafted with definitions that will help the victim of white supremacy do things that will work for the victim of white supremacy. You can go to the website Produce Justice and get either the basic book, which is what most people get, which is what I recommend for sure. And if you have some additional money, you can get the Word Guide that will help you in using both volumes. All right, but go to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com.
Okay. All righty. Let's go here. Mr. Fuller says, dear Mr. Fuller, Papa John's is bleeding money now because their former CEO loves to call us the N-word and got caught. Now he wants back in because he thinks he can keep the redneck support just like Trump. They can all get together and have a pizza and meth party while they molest young children. This is not human. Mr. Fuller, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is what it is. I mean, if somebody has committed an act of mistreatment, regardless of what it is, that should be made clear to everybody that this person did mistreat someone. And if you mistreat someone, you should compensate for having done what you did. If you deliberately, willfully and deliberately did it, that you weren't forced to do it, either directly or indirectly. A lot of black people are forced to mistreat each other. And so, but that's the white supremacists who are to blame. See, it comes down to who's to blame. But among white people themselves now, anytime they do anything to mistreat anybody, they should pay full price, and nobody else. The so-called surrogates, if any black people are involved in the mistreatment that a white person is inflicting on someone in the system of white supremacy, according to counter-racist logic, the white person is to blame for that mistreatment. All of it. All right? Because they, are the captain of the ship in the system of white supremacy. The white person is always in charge, okay, of the non-white people. So if anybody is mistreated in a system where the white supremacists are involved, or a white person is involved, and someone is mistreated, that white person on the scene is to blame for all of that mess. All right? Why? Because they have the most power to put a stop to it. Yes. That's the assumption, according to counter-racist logic.
Okay. Greetings, Mr. Fuller. Some people have compared 45, which is a reference to Donald Trump, to Hitler. We are bombarded with 45s allegedly trying to win the approval of people of color. I think that made reference to those black pastors that went to the White House to have coffee, as Malcolm explained. And one pastor was allegedly to have said that 45 was the greatest president for black people ever had. Anyway, Did Hitler try to win the approval of his targeted group, the Jews, or did he rally the extremists to eradicate the Jews? Could it be another confusion tactic? Did 45 need the approval of the minority groups to ascend to the presidency? What say you, Mr. Fuller?
I'll say what I said just a few minutes ago. It sounds like also that comes under VGQ.
Mm-hmm.
See, he mentioned something about a black pastor saying something in support of Mr. President Trump.
I read the article. Yeah, there was a group of them that went to the White House.
Well, if it's something racial, the code says. That's why we need a code, so we don't ever deviate. If any victim of racism, meaning a person of color, has an opinion about how racism should be addressed, how it should be, anything that they say about it, about race, racism, or counter-racism. This is according to the counter-racist code. It's to be accepted for what it is. Now, you don't agree with it, but what do you say about it? What would I say about what that reverend said? I would say he said what he said. Why? Because the code does not allow me to say anything else. It comes under victim's guaranteed qualification. He's qualified as a victim of white supremacy to make those statements, whatever those statements are, because it's about race, racism, or counter-racism. Even if that preacher said, all black people should be subject to white supremacy.
Okay, we're going to have to...
Even if he said that.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I am duty bound to simply say, well, that reverend said what he said.
Okay. You got to leave it there. You got to leave it there. I am so sorry to have to cut that off, but you hear the music in the background. TalkTainmentradio.com, the world's greatest radio, the way it should be heard. We thank you for the pleasure of your time. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively